Welcome back to the Invest in Yourself podcast. Today's guest is an ex-gang member by the name of Diaz. Casey details out today seeing murders and kidnappings when he was very young. Casey also talks about his early life as a gang member and participating in robberies, stabbings, and beatings. Casey eventually landed himself in prison, and he was put into solitary confinement for quite some time. While Casey was in solitary confinement, he had an awakening, and he decided to change his life around. Since Casey has been out of prison, he stuck to his word. He's been traveling the world spreading the message of God. Casey's book will be found in the video description, but without further ado, let's get into his story. Good morning, Casey. How you doing?
Hey, good morning. Thank you for having me on your podcast, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I thought you really had a really good redemption story, and that's what I really like to talk about, man, because my show is called Invest in Yourself podcast, and you were involved with the criminal life growing up and stuff, and then eventually turned your life around and went to God. So that's what I really want to cover and get into stories like that because they have a really good, they have a really good message overall, and people can really learn something from that, man. So, you want to take us back to your early life and what it was like for you growing up.
Yeah, I'm sure. Growing up, I had a fun. There was fun moments in early on. A lot of times we read stories or we hear stories that just start off, with chaos. And but although mine has that chaos in there and implanted in there, uh, there was moments where I enjoyed growing up prior to getting into all the mess that I got into. Uh, I came here from El Salvador when I was 2 years old, brought here, and pretty normal, man. I'm very appreciative that I was born in one of the last bit of eras that kids were still out on the street playing football and baseball and what have you, and so that was the normal part that I got to enjoy. Walking to school. I remember my grandma when I first started kinder. My grandma, she she's probably about 4 foot, I don't know, 11 or something or so. Um, she walked me to my first day of school, and then the second day, we're on the corner. We got to the corner, just walked from the apartment to the corner, and she looked at me and she said, "You know how to get there, right?" And I looked at her, a little bit puzzled, um, didn't know what to expect, and she says, "I said, yeah," and which I did remember how to get there. And then she says, "I'll see you afterwards." And this was a moment in time where you just walk to school still. And as an adult, I visited that area, and I go, man, that was a pretty long walk. Didn't feel like it because I always met with some of the neighborhood kids down the street, and we would all walk together. And there was moments where we met and we walked together. That was cool. That was fun. Um, but inside the apartment was where there was a lot of violence very early on. With my father being a heavy drinker and um, I mean, just brutally beating my mom. So that was there. And again, man, this is a moment in time where domestic violence wasn't looked at um, the way it's looked at today in today's society. You know, um, Sometimes you would get arrested. Most of the times you wouldn't, and it was just left alone. Um, as a kid, the next day it's a school day, and you kind of just brush it off. You don't talk about it, and on to the next day. That was there, um, but it was one of those things that I didn't like being home. Uh, I like being outside. I like being outside with my friends. Um, in the area that I grew up with, which is the Rampart District. In the Rampart District, that became it started to change. It was very, very early on in the stage of where change started to happen. The Korean population started to come in. Uh, I remember when I was a kid, there was hardly any Koreans there, and then uh, you started seeing quite a bit of a Korean population come in there, and what is now known as K Town in the Rampart district. So you know, it was cool. I thought I think everybody welcomed it. Out here, we didn't see. I don't remember ever having a program on diversity or being told you need to get along with somebody. It wasn't like that. Everybody just got along. We were just kids, and we had fun outside. So for me, my safe haven was the streets, and it wasn't anything bad. It was just normal childhood for the most part.
Yeah. So in the beginning, it was all kind of normal. I mean, somewhat in some ways, because I
Yeah.
mean, the stuff with your father was going on, and that really had an effect on you because, for like for me, I read your book, the whole story and stuff, and if there's certain things you don't want to go into, we don't have to. But uh, you know, I know with your father as well. I mean, he just really always kind of gave you a bad vibes, bad just all around, you know what I mean? And when even one day you wanted to get, revenge on him as a kid. Do you want to go into that?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. There was many moments, but one in particular, the one that I think that you're trying to mention is, there was a moment in there in the book where I describe him being, I mean, just passed out drunk next to a wall heater, and so the people of today might not know what those are, but they looked like little accordions, and they were metal, and they were gas propelled, and you turn them on, using a match or a lighter, and that's how you got heat. And he was passed out, and I learned how to turn that on. My uncle actually is the one that taught me how to turn that on. And the gas, you could open up the gas line, and you could smell the gas. And his face was not too far from the gas, where the gas comes out. And I remember pushing him, with my legs and my hands as close as possible for his face to be right next to where the gas was at. And I'm about, I don't know, 8 years old or so. For an 8-year-old kid to understand that, and I don't know what possessed me. I don't know what got in my head that something like there was no adult that told me, hey, if you know, sit under gas, you could possibly die. I just assumed that that's how that worked, and so pushed his face as close as possible and turned on the gas on that heater. And I mean, you could hear the thing whistling. It was just gas, and the whole room was filled with gas. And my mom walked in, and had she not walked in, I was going to leave it on and jam out of the room, out of the apartment. But she came in at the right time, and I remember her. She could almost tell what I was doing. Like I guess I had a guilty face, and not in the guilty face like feeling bad, like I knew I was doing something wrong, that kind of look, right?
mm-hmm.
And she got a little shock of what she knew right away what I was trying to do, and you know, and I remember telling her, I'll say I'll do it. I mean, for an 8-year-old to go to be able to put this thought together that, man, you could take your dad out right now, and I'm telling my mom, I'll take the blame for it. That's a little mature in thought,
Yeah.
for an 8-year-old. So yeah.
Yeah. And that was really before you even started getting involved with doing little crimes and stuff. But I mean, I think maybe it just has a lot to do with you being around violence, seeing him do that stuff to your mom, and it really possessed you to just go on and, do that. Not whether you really understood what that was going to do. I mean, I guess in some way you did, but no one even told you that. I guess you just kind of put two and two together, and that's what happened. And, at least your mom came in and stopped it all. Either way, I mean, some people might feel a different way, and said, oh, just let it happen. But I mean, for a kid, you don't want to put that on a kid, you know what I mean? To have them do something like that,
Yeah,
especially.
and to me, it was just a way of protecting my mom. That I was fed up with seeing her, you know, brutally attacked and defenseless. So for me, it was I was doing it for her, but I was also doing it for me. I didn't like watching that,
Yeah.
and that was my what I thought would be a good way out.
Hmm. And I mean, so after that, I mean, you would go on to start getting involved with crimes and stuff by the age of like your early teens, right?
Yeah. Oh well, wait. Before that, I think my first early crimes, and it always starts with the little stuff, right? I mean, that's just how it is. I remember we would have uh, these uh, these parties in our school classrooms from time to time, and my first uh, crime would be to go with I named one of my best friend at that time, who was his name was Jason, and him and I would go into 7-Eleven and with backpacks, and well, even before the backpack incident that I share in the book, we would get big giant Slurpees, the
Hmm.
fat Slurpees, and we would get the Slurpee and open the cap and go to the candy aisle, and we would stuff all this candy in the Slurpee, and then
Oh.
put it back up and either go into the Slurpee machine again and put more Slurpee on there, and then walk out with paying 10 cents for a piece of gum, while inside this canister, inside this can, we would have I don't know, $10 worth of candy, and we would laugh about it, and then we saw how easy it was to get away with this kind of stuff. And then the backpack thing started happening. We'd go into the backpacks, we'd go to the back and look around like we were shopping for stuff. And I'd have my backpack open, and he'd stuff my backpack, zip it back closed, and then he would turn around, and I would do the same to his backpack, and again walk out with with a little box of nerds, paying for a little box of nerds, and meanwhile, with backpacks filled with all kinds of goodies, and we would either sell these whatever we stole on campus, or we would have in the classrooms, and we look like celebrities, man, because we had all the goodies, you know. So that's what we did. And by the way, I reconnected with Jason about a year and a half ago,
Damn.
and we had some good comedy, just reminiscing on
Yeah.
childhood, stuff that we did. Yeah.
Hmm. Damn. Yeah. So I mean, even after all these years, well, so I mean, that was your way into being around that, and as well, some other things that you had written about was that you even seen a couple kidnappings in front of you. You
Yeah.
seen a couple people get killed in front of you as well. I mean, you want to go into any of these instances?
Yeah, down the street from that same 7-Eleven that I'm talking about. And by the way, uh, that street is Leeward, where this kidnapping happened. And that was the birthplace of MS-13. Back in the days, that was the actual street where all that got started.
Wow.
But in that same 7-Eleven down the street, 1 block away, was when I first saw my first kidnapping. I was going to school, and this morning, I was by myself. Nobody was with me. And on this corner is when you turn the corner and you start going up the hill to Hoover Elementary. And I get to right by the corner, and this little kid's there, the little boy, and all I see is this car, and this black dude just gets out of the car and grabs this little Hispanic kid, pulls him inside the car, shuts the door, gets in the car, and then jams. And I looked at that. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to do. It looked wrong. Not, obviously I knew that later on that was a kidnapping. And I remember going to the school, and I said something. I said, "Hey, I think there was a kid that was pushed into a car, and it just didn't look right." Nobody said nothing about it to me. Nobody went to the police. Nothing. Nothing was ever done that I know.
Damn.
I was never approached by law enforcement or by the teachers any further. I just shared it with her, and that was it. That was the
Yeah.
end of the story. So to this day, I'm puzzled to what happened to that kid. And that was one, and then the other one was a little Korean girl, uh, and that was down the street on. At that time, the street was called Ninth Street, Ninth in New Hampshire, and now it's called Jameswood. Ninth Street is now Jameswood, but it was Ninth Street back then. And again, I was by the corner going up the hill this time, and the cars from back then, they were pretty big, all metal. I don't remember. I know it was like a brownish, goldish type of color on the car. And this time it was two dudes and two black dudes, and they got in. They got out of the car. One took possession of her, put her in the back seat, and the other guy went back in the car and drove off. And that was that. You know,
No.
so they were snatching kids up back then, but you know, I was a kid, so did it make the news? I don't know. I wasn't watching news at that time, so I don't know what happened. The aftermath of these kidnappings, but I saw that. I witnessed three, three young men being executed. Killed in the back of my alley. I was around 8, 8 years old, somewhere around there. So you're absorbing all this violence, and it starts in your apartment, and you're seeing violence on the street, and I think that absorbing all of that, it starts to do something in you. You know, it almost it feels like it's a normal thing. You know,
Yeah, I could definitely see that, man, because you went through with what you're going through with at home, and then after that, seeing these people get kidnapped. That's traumatic, man, and no one did shit about it. And then these guys get murdered in your alley. I mean, that's not normal. You know what I mean? So it's you absorb it, right, and you just keep moving, and you think that it's normal because it's a lot to do with what's going on in the environment that you're in as well. So it just everyone else probably has their stories, maybe the younger kids too, a couple of them,
yeah,
in your area, they're like, oh, okay, this is whatever, but it's really not.
yeah, yeah.
And you so after you experienced that, and that was when you were really young, and then by your teenage years you were approached to join a gang, correct?
Yeah, 11 years old. I get approached by uh, and that reunion that I had with Jason. It was actually all the kids from that little area that we all. None of those kids ended up in gangs, but we had the reunion with Jason that I just talked to you about
Mm-hmm.
uh, a year and a half ago. And some of these kids, their brothers were involved in gangs. So the guy that introduces me to the gang, two of his brothers were there at this reunion. And
Damn.
yeah, so we got
They're still around then, huh? They made it.
around. They never got into the gang culture of it.
That's
Uh,
good.
but his older brother Ralph, who was the one that I see doing graffiti on the floor on the concrete sidewalk, and he's the one that introduces me to this gang. Um, I start to see. It, Ralph was much older than me, so I got to see um, just the cars that would pick him up, the girls that hung out, you know, and yeah, I guess I was intrigued by it. I liked it, and the next thing you know, man, I started getting jumped in and joining in, um, and the guy that takes me under his wing, uh, that was the turning point, because when you have an older gang member, and who's popular, who's very popular amongst not only our own gang but outside of the gang. And you start hanging out with him, well, that all that attention starts to come to you as well, because hey, if so and so is hanging out with him, he must be cool, kind of thing. And I was 11 years old, man, 12 years old at this time. Uh, that starts to mess with your ego. It starts to stroke your ego because you're getting all these pats on the back, and you're looked at like you're someone. And the influence of that is the dangerous part, because that you start to build almost like a street resume from that moment. So with him, it was with him that we went into rival territory. I speak about that in the book. In the stolen car, going through alleys, and then getting our hands on this one rival. And at the time, that was in a rival gang. Actually, they weren't rivals at that time. He just didn't like this dude, and he stabbed him, and then turned and gave me the screwdriver and said, "Your turn." And that was my first. I don't know how much damage I was able to do. I do know that I used it, and that was my first stabbing at very early on.
Yeah, and to be and do that at a young age too, man. That had to really make you think, didn't it? Or like what was going through your head after you did it?
Well, I remember him laughing, and I remember him when we got back in the car. And this I never shared, but I remember getting back in the car with him. In fact, I've never shared this, but inside the car when we got back in there, I mean, he was just like smiling from ear to ear, laughing, and just kind of like giving me that approval that like, dude, you're good, kind of that feeling. And I think it's one of those things that you know it's a role that should be played by your father, right? The
Right.
validation of
Hmm.
you did good, you're doing good, you got good grades, that praise from a father in a different side. That's what we're all looking for as kids. We might not think that we need that, but we need that. Every kid needs that. And so for me, because my father didn't do that, and I got the opposite from my father, this gang leader, this gang member, him doing that, it my how do I say it? It did something. It pumped me up. It boosted my confidence
Hmm.
that here's this dude validating me. He liked what that I didn't question it, and I did what he told me to do, and I joined in. So that those things, man, have a great deal of effect on any child, on any kid. When I tell my story and I start to look back at my age at that time, I mean, I got a 15-year-old son. He's never seen anything like that, nothing, and
Yeah.
and thank God for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you look at when I look at myself back in those days, man, that was just a recipe for disaster. That pat on the back from homeboy, that those words that came out, that that dude, you're about it, that kind of thing. That messes you up, man.
Yeah, and I think that's why kids are more susceptible to joining gangs or getting involved with criminals and stuff, because like you came from with a broken home. You didn't have that father figure in your life that you would have needed, man. And so you went out in the streets, you got it from someone else, and then now it's like you're getting praised, you're doing good things, and you feel cool. You got this ego. People are looking at you like you're cool with the popular kids, but like in reality, it's like it's not what it really is about. Because I mean, You think, like some guy in their middle age is going to join a gang? I mean, it's less likely, right? But
Mhm.
because they're aware of like it's a dead end. But as a kid, you see it as something cool.
Yeah, absolutely. The age of recruitment for any gang anywhere in the United States, it's in middle schools.
Yeah.
It's in that age, right after you graduate from elementary, going into middle school, or what we called junior high back then. That's the recruiting age. So it starts very young. And you're right. A 16-year-old who's never been in a gang is less susceptible to getting to joining because he's seen more. He's aware a little bit more to where an 11-year-old, a 12-year-old, they're just looking for a good time and not understanding the consequence of crime, the consequence of joining a street gang.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So after you really got that in, where did it lead to after that?
Oh man, and it went to a whole series of crimes from stealing cars, and again, you go from putting candy in a Slurpee, container, a cup, to a stabbing, to stealing cars, learning how to steal a car, how to hotwire a car, how to dent pull a car. You know, my first go at driving a vehicle was a stolen car. That's how I learned how to drive. And then from stealing cars, it went to carjacking. And it wasn't even called carjacking back then. It was just a GTA, a Grand Theft Auto.
Mhm.
Um, the carjacking, the term carjacking didn't come until later on in the late 80s, early 90s. Um, but that's what we were doing. And then I never did a burglary. I didn't think, I never liked doing the sneaky stuff. Uh, the breaking into a home through a window, through a door, that to me just didn't seem right. For some like crazy reason, that I thought that was like, you know, like down here in the level of, you know, the criminal, agenda. For me, it was more, I'm just going to do it to your face kind of thing. And so the home invasions were the ticket, you know, going in there while people were there and tying them up and taping them up, or, you know, kidnapping somebody, taking them to their home. All of those things, man. That it just gradually started to get worse and worse. The stabbings were out of control. I would walk into rival territory of really two certain gangs that I didn't like in Los Angeles, and to me, I didn't like the drive-by shooting thing. I never did. um, to me, walking into somebody's neighborhood and snatching a dude up, with nothing but a screwdriver, that to me was more barbaric and more in your face than just because anybody could go in the car, turn the lights off, and shoot out of a window.
Right.
That like to me it was like a chunk to do that.
Hmm.
Oh, and I like the adrenaline of chasing somebody inside their neighborhood and hunting them down with nothing but a screwdriver. And that right there is what would put my name on the map throughout Los Angeles. I mean, I think that it's safe to say that unfortunately my name was very well known in Los Angeles, in South Central, in the Rampart District, as somebody that would walk into your neighborhood and cause this kind of terror. There's nothing to be proud of that. There's nothing, but I share that to say, you know, if you're raising kids, you know, don't think that the little things if you let kids get away with the little things and there's no consequence to the little thing that they're doing, and it's a crime, but
Hmm.
we look at it as we downplay it. Don't think that it's not going to lead to worse things. It will lead to worse things, and that's just how it goes. So I think discipline in the home, it has to be there as well as parents. I mean, I raised three kids, and there was absolutely there was praise and there was discipline, and
Hmm.
one outweighed the other. With I always made sure that with my kids, there was some kind of you know adoration being extended to them when they did really good in school or at an event in school or whatever it was, right? I made sure of that. But when there was times of discipline, then they needed to know that, hey, you did that, that's wrong, and there's a consequence to that. And there's a healthy way of doing that as well. So, I just created a mess on the streets, man. And unfortunately, many people were harmed by my actions.
Yeah, I would, I'd imagine that, when you join a gang, there's all kinds of rivals and stuff. And who, with yours, who were the main rivals? I mean, you said MS-13 was one of them, right?
MS was one of them. They were one of the main ones. With them, they came in from El Salvador from a war from El Salvador in the '80s, um, and when they got here, I'll give you a little history because a lot of people are so mixed up on where MS started and how
Hmm.
it started, and I laugh of most of the interviews that I watch on the history of LA gangs. A lot of it is so inaccurate, but when you've lived it, when you've been in there and you saw it, firsthand, and you were actually involved in all this, the chaos, then you know exactly how it took place.
Right.
I could give you street names. I could give you actual names, of the people, the parties involved. So MS started when they came here from El Salvador. A lot of them didn't. Well, most of them didn't speak English. So the gangs that were already assembled, there was MS, there was Mid City, there was Rockwood, there was Drifters, there was Crazy Riders. A lot of these gangs that were already there, all of us spoke English. So when these Salvadorans came over to that area, there was no English, so they were getting punked, and they were getting made fun of. And this was really the birth of MS, and it was actually called MSS. It was Mara Salvatrucha Stoners, and they didn't lose the stoner part until later on in the county jail when they had to go under the umbrella of the Sureño, card. Then it became MS-13, but that was until way later. I would say, you know, right before '95, somewhere around there. Between '92 and '95 is when they started to. They had to, and there was some resistance from them. Green lights were placed on their neighborhood throughout the prison system and the county jails because they wanted to remain their own. And at some point, they had to bend because obviously they were outnumbered inside the system, and that's how they became MS-13 by coming under the Southside umbrella.
Hmm.
So that was them, and then, but for me, the hatred, the real hatred, was towards 18th Street. I didn't like them. I had this this rage inside. I mean, even when we were close, we got along. We shared neighborhood with them for a long time, and when I started disliking them is when I first hit juvenile hall, and I started to see things that you know crimes that they committed, such as rape and stuff like that, and nobody was saying anything. They were a big gang in numbers, but we used to make fun of them because it got to the point where you could get so big by just letting anybody in. They were just getting in. You didn't even have to speak English at this point. If you could follow up a mirror, you could get jumped into 18, and that was it.
Yeah.
And so that's how they got to the size that they got. And then, of course, on the media, portraying them because they were the largest gang at one time, portraying them as this big, thing in the streets of LA. So that, I just didn't like that, and so I would just go off on them inside juvenile halls whenever I bumped into them in East Lake, uh, which I was at all the time. Whenever I saw one, I just, and I remember them, most of them saying, but we get along, and I would just go off on them, and they didn't understand why I was, going off on them. And some of those fights I lost, and some of them I won. I took that rage out to the street and assembled a clique within our gang. called the Pequeños. And this clique, I made a call to one of my very close, homeboys, and he agreed to join in on building this clique. And that clique was designed to just go after 18. And this would have a little pushback from within, even within our own gang, because we sharing so much territory in Los Angeles with them, you knew that was going to become a bloodbath, and it did. And unfortunately, that call that was made between him and I, and the assembling of this clique, that would then, to this day, I mean, there's dudes that are doing life without parole. They'll never get out. Unfortunately, many died. Many gang members on both sides lost their life to this, and it was, as an adult, obviously I regret, ever getting involved to that degree. But that's what took place in Los Angeles, and I think that maturity, and as you grow older, you start looking back, and you there's a lot of regret in some of the decisions that one makes along this thing called.
Yeah. Well, let's go into your whole redemption, because you were busted, right? And that's when you would eventually go on to being able to redeem your life.
Yeah. So I ended up in New Folsom State Prison, and I was serving some time there. I was in solitary confinement, and in this in the hole there was when this prison ministry would come in, and they would come in on the last Thursday of the month, once a month, and this little crew of people would do the trail of driving from Adams in South Central all the way to Sacramento. That's a long drive, man. And it was a little church. It wasn't like some mega church that had comfortable buses or a comfortable van. It was just, I saw the van that they came in later on when I would get out. And it was a little rinky-dink van, man. It was, it was all metal. There was no, I don't know if they had AC or not, but it mimicked the vans from back in the days, the church vans. So, I look at that now and I go, man, these people drove at least 8 to 9 hours to go and visit the hole for 4 or 5 minutes per cell per inmate. I mean, that's some dedication, man. I don't know what else to call it. But they would go in there and they would talk to inmates, and Frances Proctor would become my hero in this story. One of the heroes, because she was the one that first approached my cell and started to talk to me and started to pray for me. I remember her telling me, because I was very resistant on anything that had to do with religion or God or anything. I didn't want anything to do with it. I wasn't aware of any of that stuff neither. So to me, it just didn't, that religion or anything faith-based it was off the radar, and I wasn't interested in what she was selling or what anybody was selling when it came to anything that had to do with faith. But I remember her words, and she said, I'm going to put you on my hit list. And that's a big word to use, in a place like that. It has a whole different meaning.
Right.
Yeah. So when she says, I'm going to put you on my prayer hit list, and I went, all right, thank you for changing that. I'm going to put you on my prayer hit list because Jesus loves you and he's going to use you. And I thought, man, that this lady has lost her marbles, man, that she doesn't know where she's at. She doesn't know who she's talking to. I don't know what to say. She was just, it was a trip, man, to see the confidence in this little lady, this little black lady, the boldness of her faith to confront me, at my worst, and to have that confidence that you know, God's going to use you. Like, how's that going to work? Right. And until I had an encounter in that cell, in which I go into detail in that book, and that would change everything, man. I had to go through some rough growing up in there. Uh, I talk about hard candy, uh, the assaults that other inmates would then uh, do to me and to everybody else that would join me in walking a Christian life in there. It's not an easy place to become a Christian. You hear about Jailhouse Religion. It has a lot of bad. It's almost like a bad word, right? Oh, he's
Mm-hmm.
now he wants to be a Christian, or now he wants to be whatever, right? Um, they're doing that because of this. To me, I didn't have nothing to lose. So, and I think that's what helped me when I reached out to other gang members in there was, if I'm here at this moment, why would I surrender that willingly?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Unless, unless something happened to me in that cell, and that was the case. For me, it was something happened in that cell that would change my heart forever, and my mind and everything else that went with it. So, when I think that when the ones that did accept, and the ones that did become Christians after me, that had to play some kind of role in, putting the two and two together. He's right. Why would he surrender being here when you have it made? Why would you give that up? And then in exchange for endangering your own, personal being, that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't make sense.
No.
So, we had to endure some hardship in there, a lot of assaults, of assaults, and but I never looked at myself as a victim ever. I just don't. I don't like that word. So I never looked at myself and went, why am I going through this? And it just, there was moments, where I was frustrated because, I share in the book about that one incident where I pull another inmate inside, and it was a bad thing that I did to him. Um, but my frustration was, after so many assaults, your mind wants to go back, to what was normal back then. And what was
Right.
normal back then is, man, I can kill anybody in here, and I should just make an example of that, of this dude or whatever, right? The easy way out for me, that was easy to do. I could snatch somebody up and have my way, and I contemplated on doing that many times, but the victim mentality of woohoo, well, why is this happening to me, and feel sorry for me because I'm going through this as a Christian, that wasn't in my head. It was just I wanted to retaliate and go back to what I knew just for a moment to, you know, teach a lesson to somebody, which was wrong, and thank God that I share about, I was making a shank. I was close to finishing up the shank, and I was going to use it on and make an example of somebody, and by God's grace and His mercy, I didn't uh, push through, and nothing happened in that sense. But that is the easy way out for someone with my kind of background. Violence is seen as a solution, or a way, a mean to ending a problem. And the more extreme it is, the better. It sends out a message, right? So, but thank God that I didn't follow through on that, and I was able to you know to see God's hand later on in that yard, and with a lot of the other inmates that would become Christians after that. And man, to this day, we still have a lot of friendships that are ongoing. Some of the guys that became Christians through my story in there, they're pastors out here. Some of them are, youth leaders, or they're married, raised a family. The ones that made it out, and others that stayed in and are still living that Christian, life, that that's not jailhouse religion at that point. That's the real thing, and it does exist. Um, some of these guys, that are out here, we there's a handful of friends that I have out here that I talk to, and we all have somewhat similar stories, of how we came to Christ. Dudes that were in Pelican Bay and in the Corcoran Shoe, in New Folsom, and in other places that were deemed, you know, extremely violent. That you could Google it, YouTube it, and see real violence in these prisons. And to come out here and raise families and be hardworking, that's the tough job right there. To do
Yeah.
right is a lot more. It takes more.
Yeah, you're right, man. And I mean, for you guys to make it out and still follow, the religion and continue to better your life. I mean, that's amazing. That's really good that you guys were all able to cross paths and really form that unity inside the prison, man. I mean, that's a hard place, and you got a lot of pushback on that, but you were able to push through that, make it through, make a lot of good friendships with people, and then even after that, you made it out, and I believe you started becoming like a preacher yourself, right?
Yeah, I became a pastor later on in life, and uh, I became a youth pastor at first, and did that for about 8.5 years in a predominantly, you know, poor neighborhood where there was a lot of. It's almost like a revolving door with, absent dads, uh, dads not in the picture at all, or dads in jail, or dads on drugs. And so in these high schools that I would go into, that was the case. 8 out of 10 kids didn't have dads in the house, and so we did Bible studies, and I became their youth pastor. And then after that, I became the young adults pastor at another church. Did that for about 5.5 years, and then I planted a church, which I pastored for about almost 8 years. So I've been in that, and now I speak all over the country. I go to gang prevention programs, uh, juvenile halls, uh, communities, and churches, and just spreading the message of the Bible message, and along with my story. And
Hmm.
I've been very fortunate to for that door to open, and for me to go and share what Christ did to my life. And I mean, a lot of people now, I'm very leery on somebody patting on my back, because you know, it the story is not about me. Uh, I, I couldn't change myself if I wanted to. The story is about the Lord that did the changes in me. It's Him that He's the champion in the story.
Right.
He's the one that changed my life and the way I think, and how I react to things. And you know, I never would have thought that I'd get married. I never thought that I'd have kids. I didn't forget, like that to me, that was so far away from my thoughts. Who's
Hmm.
gonna want to marry, a parolee? Who's gonna want to marry, I didn't have anything. I didn't nothing, right? And for God to use those very words that Francis Proctor spoke over my life, Jesus loves you and He's gonna use you, and to see it happening, that's incredible, man, and that's something that only God can do.
You're right, and I think that's why stories like yours, your book, your podcast that you have, and sharing the message and continue to put it out there. That's important because if the guys out weren't like you out here sharing that, there would be, it'd be like there would be no hope because no one can, in the criminal life would say, well, who else changed their life around? Who got out of that life? Who survived and really made a good positive life for themselves? But you were one of them, and there's a lot, you know what I mean? But that's good. That's what we need instead of promoting all the the bad stuff. I
Yeah.
mean, so that's good, man. That's why I wanted to bring you on today.
And thank you, man. Just 2 weeks ago, I was in Utah at a gang prevention program out there. And when you think about Utah, you go, Utah, gangs, how does that happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's LA gangs that went over there and planted themselves.
Right.
It's just like, it's. I almost compare it to church planting. It can happen anywhere, and these LA gangs went over there and planted themselves. And I went there, and there was 24 gang members there, young gang members that reminded me of me. And we went over there with an FBI agent, a retired FBI agent, Ken, and Gus, who was a gang leader in Miami in the prison system. And then I took Hector, who was part of my gang back in the days, and he has a story as well. And, we fly into Utah, 24 young gang members. We talk to them. We play, games with them. We break bread with them. And at the end of that time that we spent with them, 23 of them become Christians.
Really?
23 of the 24.
Damn.
I mean, this is what you could do. I don't consider myself a motivational speaker. That's not what I do. I go in there with the Bible, as well as Gus and Hector. We go in there with the Bible, man, and we share, all the mud that we went through, that we caused. But more than that, we share what the gospel is able to do in the life of any human being that repents and comes to the Lord, and then allows God to do what he's going to do in your life. And, Gus, that was his first time, and so was Hector's first time flying out and sharing their story. And I remember Gus saying, he said, I always dreamed about flying out and sharing my story. And here I am. This is my first time, and seeing, and I've been in airports. I mean, I'm in an airport almost every month, it seems, right? and I mean, I'm flying all over the place. And I love that they're happy that they're being used by the Lord to go and see the evidence and the change in young men and women. 23 of 24.
That's amazing.
That's amazing, man. That's only what God can do, and we're just, vessels, man. We're just instruments in God's hands. That's it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story, Casey, man. I'll of course put your podcast and your book in the video description.
Thank you, bro.
Just thank you again so much for coming on, man.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. Appreciate all your time and what you do as well, and sharing all the stories. God bless you, bro.
Thank you. God bless you too. Casey has changed his life around for the better. This is the kind of stories I love to hear. He transformed his life into something that he didn't even think was possible. It's never too late to make a change in your life. Please comment any key takeaways that you got from this interview. Please share it with anyone that you think will enjoy this type of content. Also, please share it with someone that you think it may help. Maybe they're an at-risk criminal. Casey's book will be in the video description. In his book, he goes into a lot more detail about his life story. I highly recommend it. It was a great read. Please be sure to subscribe to my channel for more interviews like this, and we'll see you on the next one.